gentlemen, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for this devotional. Today we're in Proverbs chapter 23. I'm going to read verses 29 through 30. The author here starts off with a list of 6 questions. Listen to them. He says, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who tarry long over wine, those who go to try mixed wine. Now, this section is a warning about what happens to those who excessively drink. Of course, and some of you may not know this, but the Bible has a whole lot to say about drinking and drunkenness. For example, by chapter 9 of the first book of the Bible, we already have a story about someone who got drunk. And it wasn't just anybody. It was a significant figure in biblical history, a man named Noah. You see, after the flood, Noah, who was God's man, planted a vineyard and then got hammered in Genesis 9. You can read it yourself. And then again, a little further along in the Genesis story, a friend of Noah, his name was Lot, was given excessive amounts of wine by 2 of his daughters who deliberately got him drunk so that they might have sex with him to preserve their lineage. And they both did end up getting pregnant. You can read about that in Genesis chapter 19. And throughout the Bible, there are a few other smatterings of stories like these, telling the tales of men who drank too much. Yet, the Bible only restricts drunkenness, not drinking. You see, if you're self-controlled enough to actually drink in moderation, drinking is just fine. In fact, even Jesus confessed to moderate drinking in Matthew chapter 11, verses 18 through 19. And yet there are other men who are like John the Baptist who never drank. Therefore, we can conclude both of these positions, moderation and abstinence, are acceptable positions on drinking according to God's word. But in this text, the writer helps us to see 6 different effects of excessive drinking posed in the form of questions. In the first set of questions, he alludes to the emotional problems of the drunkard, like woe and sorrow. In the second set of 2 questions, he alludes to the social problems of the drunkard, strife and complaining. And in the third set of questions, he alludes to the physical problems of the drunkard, wounds and redness of eyes, which pretty much describes every dive bar you have ever seen, doesn't it? Seated at bars across the world are men with emotional, social, and physical problems. And gentlemen, there is no solution found in drinking for emotional problems, social problems, or physical problems. No solution. Now, it is true that excessive drinking might help you forget your problems for a short period of time, but when the intoxication wears off, your problems will be back, and you might discover you've developed a whole new problem. An addiction to unhealthy and unhelpful habits, which is the case for many. So if this is the case for you today, there is a solution, and the answer begins with a spiritual step. I know this isn't going to sound intuitive to you because we think to address the drinking problem, we need to focus on the drinking problem. And yes, drinking is a problem. I get it. It's a big problem. It needs attention. But it's only a symptom of the problem. It's a symptom of a problem with you. And real change to who you are doesn't begin with what you do. It starts with who you are. Drinking, you see, is your solution to a much bigger problem with you. And the Bible teaches that we are spiritual people who need spiritual solutions. It teaches the only solution is the power of Christ living in you. And it is by that spiritual power given to you by Christ that you're going to find victory over drinking problems that have masked every other problem, emotional, spiritual, and physical. You see, you can try to stop drinking, but that's futile power. It's not enough. You need divine power, a power that only God provides. And this power gives supernatural victory in every daily battle that will change desires and with it change your behaviors. Paul says this in Galatians 2:20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And then later on in Galatians chapter 5, verse 16, Paul says, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. I hope this has been helpful for you today. If it has, share it with someone you know. And guys, I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.